Eden Kaz here with Just Be, and we are about to take a spiritual boom. We are at an unprecedented time in human history where we are transitioning from 3D to 5D within the great spiritual awakening. This video and audio podcast is the place for you to find your truth beyond politics, your sovereignty, your voice. Let's kick up your vibration now. By the way, each episode ends with the Just Be practice to do just that. And as we begin the show, just to know a little bit more about me, I'm a soul realignment specialist, meditation master, and dimensional healer. Learn more, and there's merch also at EdenJustBe.com. Let's get this party started. Eden, Just Be, Spiritual Boom, in association with the Grassroots Warriors Network on Rumble. And I am co-anchor there, plus my show has its own channels. So Grassroots is a collection of truthers, patriots, spiritualists like me, including the likes of Kevin Hoyt, who also interviewed Brandon, who I'm going to introduce in a moment, Michael Jaco, my dear friend Lisa Schermerhorn, Mark Atwood. And some of these folks have really put their life on the line, talking about truths and exposing things. So give it up to them and support them. Hey, Brandon Joe Williams, don't be a slave. How you doing?
Hi, good. How are you doing?
I'm very good. Welcome to the show. And Brandon knows I'm going to talk for just a second before we introduce him and get into some meat. Okay, so for those of you who are new, who want to skip over this, it'll be just a couple minutes before we get to Brandon, because I'm going to do things a little bit differently today. Typically, I get into the personal stuff first and then get into the meat and things. But this time, we're going to get to meat and things and then talk personally towards the end, because there is stuff that you need to know. Okay, for those of you who come here a good bit, you know the show is all about spirituality and leaving this matrix and doing it in a spiritual way, yet knowing this is also a human ascension. So Brandon is here today to help us do human stuff. Like, okay, for example, one of the things you guys know I'm doing is getting rid of my smart meter. So I had a smart meter guard on it. Then I got all the spiritual stuff to help transmute the energy. And then with the California fires and knowing that so many homes had smart meters, I'm like, okay, I've got to just step it up and get rid of it and pay for them to remove it and then pay for the extra cost per month, because I just don't want to be in the system. I don't want them to be able to flip a switch and turn my power off. I'd at least like them to come down to my house. Okay, so what we're going to talk about today is United States stuff. I'm going to put all these things out there and we'll see what we discuss. We might talk about the 14th Amendment and how it was not ratified. And we all believe it was to abolish slavery, when in fact it makes all of us a slave. So Brandon, feel free at any point to correct anything that I'm not saying quite as polished, because I know words make a huge difference. Okay, so what really is money? Why not to retain a lawyer? The words person, citizen, identity, location, naturalization, no need to have a driver's license, and how to have infinite money. And we are all employees of the District of Columbia. Finally, before I read his bio, thank you for your patience. This show is also broadcast on community radio. So Brandon and I are going to keep it PG. But as I mentioned to you in email, if you want to do any, body figurative things, feel free, because they can't see you do that.
Good.
Okay. Well, this will be
good
fun.
Reminder.
Good. Yes. Thank you. All right. So Brandon Joe Williams in California, he specializes in breaking down complex legal systems and wording. Founder of, here we go, One Stupid F, the word.com, founder of the Contract Killer course. Right now, there are 26 videos. I'm on number 3, which I got a lot to do. And I watched a whole bunch of other podcasts with you before our show. And actually, I usually end the show with a Just Be practice. So your practice is going to be to go to Brandon's website, and I'll include the links down below, to start watching the Contract Killer course, the Contract Killer course. Start watching it. All right. Ooh. Okay. So the videos will teach you about our legal system, the fallacies, and how you can get out. You're also a podcast host, author, king of sarcasm, king of the Amnesty Coalition, and Williams and Williams law firm. All right. Anything else you want to add into that?
All good. Thank you very much.
Yeah, you're welcome. Okay. I do want to start here. Your website, One Stupid, it's in your face. And I want to talk about that you do that on purpose, from what I understand, to downgrade yourself so no one can really attack your integrity or your character. And and I also understand that you're doing that to reach a younger demographic. Talk more, like if an older lady comes to your site and sees you in that picture with a banana sling, yeah, talk about your verbiage, why you do what you do.
Well, I have to ask you, did you
Yes.
guess those things, or did you know that from me talking about it on other shows?
Oh, on other shows, and I've been to that from other shows.
I was gonna say, because you're the first person who's like, "Do you do that specifically so that people can't attack you?" And it's like, "Oh, okay, wow, that'd be the first time anyone's ever guessed that." Because that is the truth. That is
Oh, and
exactly why I made it.
yeah,
Um, the other part is yes, younger demographic. So when I started getting into this, bless their souls, nothing wrong with it. I don't say this as a way of being mean or condemnation of anyone or anything. In fact, it's the only people who have any brain cells left are the people above the age of probably 60 years old. But the thing, I mean, I'm sorry, I think I'm an outlier personally. I'm trying to change that. That's what I'm
yeah.
trying to do, right? So it's the Beavis and Butthead entry door into hopefully something more. And that's the whole point. And you would be blown away by how many people that are older, even older women, are into what I do and involved with what I do.
I would
You'd
believe it.
be you'd be you'd be shocked. I would say probably I'd say women above the age of 60 is a huge percentage of my overall platform. And when I say huge, I'd say if I just throw a number out there, 15-20%, maybe even a little higher, maybe, but it's a huge chunk of my audience is that demographic. And I think the reason why is because they can see what I'm trying to do, and I think that's the difference between a 60 plus year old woman. There's two different categories. There's one who just sees the words and gets offended. And there's another one who sees what I'm trying to do and sees the intention, right? Two very different categories. One absolutely hates me, one absolutely loves me. So, it just depends. It just depends. You're flipping the coin, you know what I mean? Um, but typically above the age of 60, which I was a marketing and sales guy for many, many years. I don't know, since 2010, when I really started to get into it really heavily. At that time, I think I was 22 years old.
Mm.
And then I did marketing and sales unsuccessfully for many years. I think most people go through that in that industry, right?
Yeah.
And then as I started to kind of get my wits about me, I would say I worked in the industry pretty regularly and pretty aggressively for a long time before I started to get any sort of stable ground. I'd say it wasn't until maybe 31 years old or 32 years old, so 10 years in the industry before I started to really catch on. And then in my early 30s, I read like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of marketing and sales books, and that was kind of like the big. I went from 31, 32 to, like, by the time I was 33 or 34, very successful, very very good at it, making quite a bit of currency, all these crazy things. And then I actually did that for another few years, and then started to get into this legal stuff.
Okay, and what do
And
you mind me asking that one the marketing book that changed your direction where you threw out all your other books? What was that one called?
uh, marketing book where I threw out all the other
Yeah,
marketing
she
books.
did she have
Oh,
a
oh,
call
oh.
service?
Yes, that's. I didn't throw out all the books. I threw out most of them.
Okay.
That's Uncensored Sales Strategies by Sydney Biddle Barrows. It's actually not even printed anymore, which
Oh
is really, really
no.
screwed up.
Okay.
So you can either get the PDF. I don't
Mm,
normally recommend people get PDFs of books that people are trying to sell, but if they aren't trying to sell it, I don't really see anything wrong with it. Or
yeah.
you can get it secondhand. I paid quite a bit for mine. I think $100 or 120, and it's probably a
Oh
lot
wow.
more now than it was when I bought mine. I
Okay.
bought mine probably 5 or 6 years ago.
Okay.
So Yeah, that was a big one. Dan S. Kennedy, Dan S. Pena, and then Sydney Biddle Barrows. But Biddle Barrows was the whole reason why her book exists is because of Dan S. Kennedy. He loved her stuff so much, and he's like, "I'll help you write it. I'll help you publish it.
Hmm.
I'll help you market it. I'll help you do." So if it wasn't for Dan S. Kennedy, that book wouldn't even exist. And there's a foreword in Sydney's book about why the book exists and how Dan S. Kennedy helped her do it, and how if it wasn't for him, it would have never existed, etc. So I think he's one of the best sources of marketing and sales information in the world, personally,
Hmm.
coming from a guy who studied so many people, I can't even tell you.
Yeah.
But anyways, so at that point in my life, I basically bought the one stupid f.com URL about a year before I started using it. And it was going to be a rebellion against the whitewashed aspect, the sterilized marketing and sales world that I hated so much. By the time I had conquered it, I had hated it.
Hmm.
And so I knew I wanted to create the anti-brand. I wanted a brand that went up against everything I've ever learned. Um,
I have to giggle. That's great.
and yeah, and it was just all my frustration and all my excitement and all my knowledge and all my skill all combined into one thing. And I didn't know what I was going to do with the URL. I actually had the URL for over a year,
Yeah.
and I knew I was going to do something with it. And then when I came across all this law stuff, that's when I decided to put it to use. So it was already a thought. It was already there.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. So before we start to get into this, I want to talk about because a lot of the listeners, we've all been down rabbit holes after rabbit holes. So we're going to go down some more rabbit holes again. So talking about cognitive dissonance, and you talked about emotional assimilation as you discovered certain things. I think naturalization was one that you said it took you like 6 weeks to just be like, okay. So before we start talking about things, what would you recommend to people in terms of that, in terms of accepting what you have to say?
Um, I don't know. I mean, the real truth is I really don't care. That's really,
That's true.
I don't charge for my courses and I don't charge for
Yep.
my information. And I go on these shows like, I used to do like a year and a half ago, I was on these shows like 5, 6 days a week. And then
Mm.
I got a little burned out after about a year and a half of that,
Oh,
or a year or something.
yeah.
And then, I didn't do any shows for about 6 months. And then now I'm doing like 3 shows a week. I'm trying to really, really only do three. I'm not trying to do, more than three. So I'm
Mm.
trying to make this kind of like a regular thing and not get burned out on it.
Mm.
Um, I just don't, I really couldn't, I literally couldn't care any less. That's really the true answer to your question. I mean, if I was paid $10 million to attempt to try to care less, I wouldn't be able to accept the money. It's physically impossible.
Well, and this is really a healthy way to do it. Hey, I'm going to give you this info and you do with it what you want. You think what you want.
Yeah,
It's,
it's not really, I'm not trying to sell anything. So,
yeah.
I mean, I have a law firm and I have all this stuff and we're going to have more stuff here soon. And I have an event that I'm holding and stuff, but really at the end of the day, I just really don't care.
Okay. I think that's awesome. All right, should I so I would like to go into the 14th Amendment. Shall I share the
Sure.
screen with you?
Yeah, let's do
All
it.
right, let's okay, one button. I've never done this before.
So, yeah, the 14th Amendment, we can start with that.
Mhm.
But the first place I like to start with this is actually a particular case. The Van Valkenburg case is where I've been starting with these shows. So let's start here, and then we'll
Okay.
move from here into all of that. Okay.
Okay.
So this comes from a California Supreme Court case, and we're going to go into United States Supreme Court case as well. So this is just, I like this one because it just gives the whole picture in a nutshell really, really rapidly without a whole lot of words and terminology and legalese.
Mm-hmm.
So in this court case, they're talking about the 14th Amendment. They're talking about U.S. citizenship, right? Because U.S. citizen, that idea of a U.S. citizen, was born from the 14th Amendment. So let's go ahead and see here what this judge has to say in this case. No white person born within the limits of the United States and subject to their jurisdiction, or born without those limits and subsequently naturalized under their laws, owes the status of citizenship to the recent amendments to the federal Constitution. So what does that mean, that first line? That first line means that white people have nothing to do with the 14th Amendment, and white people aren't and cannot be U.S. citizens. We've already, just one sentence in, we've already covered that. So we're going to keep going, okay?
Okay.
The history and aim of the 14th Amendment is well known, and the purpose had in view in its adoption well understood. That purpose was to confer the status of citizenship upon a numerous class of persons domiciled within the limits of the United States who could not be brought within the operation of the naturalization laws because native born, and whose birth, though native, had at the same time left them without the status of citizenship. So, what does that mean? That means that these people, who they haven't even talked about yet, we're about to, uh, could not be naturalized. They could not have citizenship um, because of various reasons he's going to get into in just a moment, okay?
Mm-hmm.
These persons were not white persons, but were, in the main, persons of African descent who had been held in slavery in this country, or, if having themselves never been held in slavery, were the native-born descendants of slaves. Prior to the adoption of the 14th Amendment, it was settled that neither slaves nor those who had been such, nor the descendants of these, though native and freeborn, were capable of becoming citizens of the United States, which is the Dred Scott v. Sanford case, very well-known case. We're going to be going over that in detail as well, hopefully on this show.
Mm-hmm.
So what they're saying here is prior to the 14th Amendment, these released slaves couldn't have citizenship, basically. That's all they're saying right there, right?
Okay.
So here's the next line. The 13th Amendment, though conferring the boon, which means free benefit, though conferring the boon of freedom upon native-born persons of African blood, had yet left them under an insuperable, which means unable to be overcome, bar as to citizenship. And it was mainly to remedy this situation, mainly to remedy this condition, that the 14th Amendment was adopted. So the 14th Amendment was adopted specifically because the 13th Amendment released black African slaves, but they couldn't have any citizenship. So the 14th Amendment created a new type of citizenship called the U.S. citizen category that has nothing to do with white people or people who were living in one of the several states of the Union. It was specifically and only a special type of federal citizenship that was created specifically to give the newly released black African slaves a different type of citizenship. So if we go up to the Supreme Court case on this, this is the case that this whole thing actually came from. It's called the Slaughterhouse cases. And you can go to Google Scholar. And you can go to, click on here where it says case law, and you can go to the Slaughterhouse cases. And you'll see it right here. And then you click right here. And this is the final opinion by a man named Samuel Freeman Miller. This is the guy who is speaking in this particular opinion. I mean, obviously, there's a whole panel of judges, but he's the one actually delivering this opinion, right?
Okay.
So, what does Samuel Freeman Miller have to say about all this, right? And he's very, very clear about all this. We'll start with this quote here. Okay. So he says here, the first section of the 14th article, to which our attention is more specially invited, opens with a definition of citizenship. Not only citizenship of the United States, but citizenship of the states. No such definition was previously found in the Constitution, nor had any attempt been made to define it by act of Congress. It had been the occasion of much discussion in the courts, by the executive departments, and in the public journals. It had been said by eminent judges that no man was a citizen of the United States, except as he was a citizen of one of the states composing the Union. So we'll stop right there.
Mm-hmm.
So what he's saying is that prior to this particular case, which is called the Slaughterhouse Cases in 1873, there was no such thing as the United States citizen, the U.S. citizen. It didn't exist, right? He says it was said by eminent judges that no man was a citizen of the United States, except as he was a citizen of one of the states comprising the Union. So what does that mean? It means there was no such thing as a U.S. citizen. There was only things like Californians or Utahns or Floridians or Texans. So the whole point of that is that each state is essentially a different country, and each country has its own nationality or citizenship. That's what he's saying here, right? So those, therefore, who had been born and resided always in the District of Columbia or in the territories, though within the United States, were not citizens. So what he's saying here is people who had been born in the various territories or in the District of Columbia, they weren't given state citizenship. They weren't actually like Americans, basically. It's a whole different zone, basically, right? So this whole thing is also talking specifically about those people as well as the slaves, okay? Whether this proposition was sound or not had never been judicially decided, but it had been held by this court in the celebrated Dred Scott case only a few years before the outbreak of the Civil War that a man of African descent, whether a slave or not, was not and could not be a citizen of a state or of the United States. So he's saying that this Dred Scott case, if they're a slave, they can't be a citizen of a state, and they can't be a citizen of the United States. But he already said there basically isn't such thing as a citizen of the United States, right? So then he says this decision, while it met the condemnation of some of the ablest statesmen and constitutional lawyers of the country, had never been overruled. And if it was to be accepted as a constitutional limitation of the right of citizenship, then all the Negro race who had been recently been made free men were still not only not citizens, but were incapable of becoming so by anything short of an amendment to the Constitution. So he's giving the background to the 14th Amendment. This is why the 14th Amendment was put together, right? Specifically to give these people some kind of citizenship, right? To remove this difficulty primarily and to establish a clear and comprehensive definition of citizenship, which should declare what should constitute citizenship of the United States and also citizenship of a state, the first clause of the first section was framed. And then here's where we see this thing that everyone and their mothers has been arguing about and fighting about since, literally 1871, which is the first line of the 14th Amendment. All persons born and or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States and of the state wherein they reside. The reason why there's been as many opinions about what this says as there are people since 1871 is because there's many, many, many legal words inside of here that no one knows the definition to. Mm-hmm. No one knows the definition of the word persons. No one knows the definition of the word naturalized. No one knows the definition of United States. And no one knows the definition of subject. No one knows the definition of citizens. And no one knows the definition of state. That's actually more complicated than people think. And then definitely nobody knows the definition of the word reside. And that is the problem. This is a completely different sentence than what anyone has ever read this sentence to mean. We've already covered the word persons means African slaves that were released after the Civil War due to the 13th Amendment, but had no citizenship. That's the definition of the word persons. So all released slaves of African descent would be how you'd read that. Born or naturalized in the District of Columbia or one of its territories. That's how you would read United States. He already told you that up top. Born in the United States. So if we go to 4 USC 71, we're going to find out where is the United States. All that part of the territory of the United States included within the present limits of the District of Columbia shall be the permanent seat of government of the United States. And then UCC, which is the Uniform Commercial Code 9-307, tells it even clearer. Where is the United States? Subsection H, location of United States. The United States is located in the District of Columbia, which is exactly what Miller already said. Mr. Miller, Justice Miller already told us that up top. He already said people who were born in the District of Columbia or one of its territories, those, therefore, who had been born and resided always in the District of Columbia or in the territories. The word territories, if you look that up, what are the U.S. territories? Territories are subnational administrative divisions and dependent territories overseen by the federal government of the United States. The American territories differ from the U.S. states and Indian reservations in that they are not sovereign entities. In contrast, each state has a sovereignty separate from that of the federal government, and each federally recognized Native American tribe possesses limited tribal sovereignty as a dependent sovereign nation. So what are these? There's 5 inhabited territories and 9 uninhabited territories and 2 claimed territories. I usually only cover the 5 inhabited ones. American Samoa, Guam, Northern Mariana Islands, Puerto Rico, and the United States Virgin Islands. So now if we go back to this line, this first line of where they're talking about the, so all released slaves of African descent, born or naturalized in the District of Columbia or one of its territories, and subject to the jurisdiction thereof, meaning, and he covers that down here, the phrase subject to its jurisdiction was included to exclude from its operation children of ministers, consuls, and citizens or subjects of foreign states born within the United States. So if we were to reread this now, all released slaves of African descent, born or naturalized in the District of Columbia or one of its territories, and is not a child of a minister, consul, or citizen or subject of foreign states born within the District of Columbia or one of its territories are citizens of the United States.
Okay.
That's what they're actually saying here. This is the first line of the 14th Amendment only has to do with black African released slaves and the District of Columbia and its U.S. territories.
Okay, I have to ask you a question, Brandon. How did you start to dissect all of this? Because even just me watching you do it, I'm like, I could not have done that. How are you able to do this?
I guess just curious, you know.
Man. Okay, keep going.
Very,
I,
very curious.
I
Well,
love
I'm
your
a
curiosity.
Scientologist, and so for the longest time, you know, one of the biggest things in my religion is we have to clear up all of our words and dictionaries. It's like a big part of the religion, right? So I've been doing this for like 15 years, like all day. Like if I'm reading like a magazine and
Mhm.
I see a word I don't understand, I look it up in a dictionary. If I'm looking at, you know, a sign on the wall and I see a word I don't understand, I look it up in a dictionary, you know. I've been doing it for so long, you know, like 15 years. So it's to me, it's just it's like eating a ham sandwich or having
It's
a
just
cigarette or
normal.
something. Yeah, oh yeah, totally
Okay.
normal.
Okay. And I do want to talk to you about Scientology later. So thank you for giving that intro there. So within that, it was also clearing out your words. So you were just used to dissecting words that you see, words that you speak. So that was kind of like your where you were anyway.
Yeah, it's not enforced the way it should within the
Yeah.
religion, but we even have a particular judiciary code, and
Oh,
to go past words that you don't fully understand is actually a very serious crime in my religion. So,
interesting. Okay. Thank you.
yeah, it's something that we need to improve on it, but
Mm.
in compared to anywhere else in society, yeah, we're very very big sticklers. You A lot of times people in the religion and stuff, you'll notice them asking, like, if you even if you say a word, they'll say, what does that word mean or something, so it's very common practice with what we do,
Hmm.
so
Okay. So this is just an extension of that,
yeah.
essentially. Okay. Go ahead, please.
So um and then if we start getting into the definition of the word reside, that takes a while to basically get all that worked out. But basically, the word reside, and on a lot of other shows, I'll take you down this rabbit hole. It just takes a while. I can, well, I'll screw it. I'll go ahead and show it to you because it's so important, and I just would never want to do anything that would. Let's see here. We've got domicile. Let's look up domicile. So domicile is the actual home, and then residence means a temporary place that you are staying for
Hmm.
either some sort of professional or recreational purpose. So, um, let's see, domicile. Here we go, and then we're going to go down to right around here. Um, the established, fixed, permanent, or ordinary dwelling place or place of residence of a person, as distinguished from his temporary and transient, though actual place of residence. But there's another one. Uh, Domicile and residence, however, are frequently distinguished in that domicile is the home, the fixed place of habitation, while residence is a transient place of dwelling, right?
Hmm.
And we can see that again if we go to voter registration California, you can see here. Um, these are all the different selections that you have when you're registering to vote.
Yeah.
You'll see here that every single one of them for your audio listeners says a U.S. citizen and something different. A U.S. citizen and a U.S. citizen and a U.S. citizen and a U.S. There's a couple of them that don't have that, but still, all of them require you to say U.S. citizen. Now, remember, what's a U.S. citizen? White people can't be. You and I can't be U.S. citizens. It's physically impossible because we're white, right? So, who can become a U.S. citizen? A released slave of African descent who was released by the 13th Amendment, didn't have citizenship, and then they were given a special type of citizenship, which was born inside of a case called the Slaughterhouse Cases, which is an interpretation of the 14th Amendment. So, am I any of these bubbles? The answer is no. And if you go to 18 USC 911, you can see here, this is how I live my life. Whoever falsely and willfully represents himself to be a citizen of the United States shall be fined under this title or imprisoned not more than 3 years or both. So I never say I'm a U.S. citizen because if I do, in my head, I'm committing a felony and it's a pretty serious felony because perjury is typically up to 1 year in prison. So this is like perjury times three. Okay.
Hmm.
So when you're looking at this first bubble we have here is a U.S. citizen and resident of California, right? The word citizen means that you've like subjected yourself to a particular body of law in a particular world or a particular country. And U.S. is defined as the District of Columbia and its territories, right? So, for example, someone born in Guam, even though they aren't black of African descent, they don't really have any other option except becoming a U.S. citizen. They don't have state citizenship. They don't have that option. Only people who are born in the states have the option to have state citizenship, right? So what this sentence is actually saying, and it's so shocking when you finally find out what it means, is this sentence is essentially somebody who has subjected themselves to the District of Columbia and its U.S. territories, which has nothing to do with the 50 states of the Union. Keep in mind, because the thing is we can see that in a case called Kaha versus U.S. So in Kaha, he says here, this statute is one of universal application within the territorial limits of the United States and is not limited to those portions which are made within the exclusive jurisdiction of the national government, such as the District of Columbia. Generally speaking, within any state of this union, the preservation of the peace and protection of person and property are the functions of the state government and are no part of the primary duty, at least, of the nation. The laws of Congress in respect to those matters do not extend into the territorial limits of the states, but have force only in the District of Columbia and other places that are within the exclusive jurisdiction of the national government. And you can even go to Google and you can say, is California within the exclusive territorial jurisdiction of the national government? No. California is not. So what we have, when we're looking at a map, what we have is if we go to a map and we look at the United States of America, so this is 50 different countries, and there's also a 51st country right here. But the thing is that this says United States. This is not the United States. This is the United States of America. This, if I can even find it, this is the United States. So this is the United States. This is the United States of America.
And for those of you that are listening, I really encourage you to watch because Brandon is showing some great, and I'm a very visual person too. Yeah. Yeah.
So Washington, D.C. is the United States because you got to think, what states are they referring to?
Yeah.
You hear United States, you're assuming they're talking about the 50 states of the Union. They are not talking about the 50 states of the Union. They're talking about these territories in the District of Columbia. They're talking about the District of Columbia, American Samoa, Guam, Northern Mariana Islands, Puerto Rico, and the U.S. Virgin Islands, all of which are states and all of which are united. People assume they hear United. You think about it, United States is any states that are working together for any reason could be called United States. I mean, so people have just assumed for over 150 years what they're talking about when they're talking about United States.
Mm-hmm.
They're not talking about California at all when they use the term United States. So when you're looking at your W-9 tax form, and it says here, this is the one that everyone signs, right? Mm-hmm. If I sign this, I'm going to prison for up to 3 years. Certification number 2, under penalties of perjury, I certify that. And then subsection 3, I am a U.S. citizen or other U.S. person, defined below. And then you go down to where it says sign here, signature of U.S. person. I'm not a U.S. citizen or U.S. person, and I never have been since the day I was born. So if I sign one of these, what happens? 18 U.S.C. 901, I go to prison for up to 3 years. Now you ask yourself, what's the benefit of all this information? Well, only U.S. citizens and residents inside of the United States have to pay taxes. So it goes even farther. If I even file a tax return, I go to prison. It's not, do you pay taxes? It's beyond a no. It's a no, and if I did, I'd be going to prison. Pretty interesting because people, oh, do you pay taxes? I'm not going to prison. No. I'd go to prison if I did. Yeah. Because I'd be saying under
Ah.
penalty of perjury that I am a released slave of African descent that's a resident, which means a temporary visitor for some sort of business or recreational purposes inside of the District of Columbia or Guam, Puerto Rico, the U.S. Virgin Islands, the Northern Mariana Islands, or American Samoa, all of which is a lie. So if I lied under penalty of perjury, that's prison.
So, so are we all lying?
Yeah, but the thing is, if you look at 18 USC 901, this is the
Yeah.
only word that saves you.
Okay, willfully.
So you weren't willfully doing that, right? But now that you understand these things,
Oh,
now it would be considered willfully. So now, once you understand these various definitions and you start going down these rabbit holes, really all you need to do is just read the slaughterhouse cases. I mean, just that alone, I mean, you'll be fine. If we go back to that, so he says here, so continuing where we left off, the first observation we have to make on this clause. Oh, I'm sorry. Actually, let's go back to we were looking at voter registration. Sorry about
mhm.
that. Let me go back to that real quick. Where did that go? Here it is. So a U.S. citizen and resident of California. So if California and United States are two totally separate countries, and you've pledged yourself to the country called United States,
Mhm.
which is what makes you a U.S. citizen. You're a resident when you're inside of California. You aren't a citizen of California.
Mhm.
And that's why it's written this way. Resident means foreigner. Whenever you see the word resident, if you just replace it with the word foreigner, it makes it really simple. And then we can go to actually another case. This is actually really good. This will actually this cleans this up. I just found this the other day.
Oh,
This will clean all this up for us.
okay.
The only absolute and unqualified right of citizenship is to residence within the territorial boundaries of the United States. A citizen cannot be either deported or denied entry. And this is from a Puerto Rico court, obviously, because Puerto Rico is one of the territories. So if we were to reread this, the only absolute and unqualified right of citizenship is to residence within the territorial boundaries of the District of Columbia, Guam, Puerto Rico, the U.S. Virgin Islands, American Samoa, or the Northern Mariana Islands. A citizen cannot be either deported or denied reentry. So, for example, I actually can't legally go into Washington, D.C. or any of the territories. Like, for example, if I was going to go to Washington, D.C., I would probably call ahead and say that I'm like a foreign diplomat or something like that. And I was going to be going because I don't have, I don't have a right to be there. So it's the opposite of this sentence. This is why the whole J6 thing was so ugly, by the way. Everything I'm teaching you is exactly why all the J6 protesters were just scooped up and put in cells in Washington, D.C., because they don't realize they were in a different country completely. Washington, D.C. is a
That's
completely different
interesting.
country. So what it was
That's
is
interesting.
actually it was actually international terrorism. I'm not saying that it's terrorism. I'm not saying I have a lot of friends that went to that thing.
Yeah,
So
I
I'm not
do.
saying. But what I am saying is that they took it as international terrorism. But the thing is that
Ah,
they won't say any of this because if they say it, it will um it'll add too much clarity and so people start asking too many questions. But
yeah.
when you say you're a U.S. citizen, also you're telling them that you're a released slave of African descent. You're basically property, essentially, of the District of Columbia when you say you're a U.S. citizen. So
Ooh.
so you don't really have rights as a U.S. citizen, right? Even here it tells you the only absolute and unqualified right of citizenship. So if they put you in a prison cell in the District of Columbia, they're actually following the law because the only thing they can't do is deport you from the District of Columbia.
Goodness gracious.
So in order to follow the law, they would have to extradite you to the District of Columbia, and then they can imprison you there. And then as long as you're in prison in the District of Columbia, they're actually following the law because you're a resident of California. A resident of California, a U.S. citizen and resident of California means somebody who has pledged their allegiance to the District of Columbia, but they're in a foreign country as a guest or a foreigner called California. That's what this sentence means.
Jeez. So when this all started clicking together, because there are a lot of different pieces and parts to construct it all, what were you thinking about it? What was going through your head? Because I know you talked about when you started to discover this and go into it, like a lot of people were not on your side. Like, what are you doing? And I think you said for a while there was a little bit of fear in you in terms of what you were discovering and making next steps. Yeah, how did that come about? How did you move through it?
Just kept doing it. I don't, it wasn't
Yeah,
really like there was never really like should I stop or should I not do this?
yeah,
Never entered my mind at all. It was just additional pain that I had to endure. It was just part of that. I mean, it wasn't, stopping was never even, I mean, I could have been arrested, beaten, crippled. It really wouldn't have made any difference.
yeah,
I mean, you could bash out all my windows, burn my cars, put me on the street, rip my arms off, rip my teeth out one by one. It would just really wouldn't make any difference.
yeah. I would agree with you there. It's like kind of like once you start going down rabbit holes, you can't stop and you can't go back, and you wouldn't want to go back because it's just a fallacy. It's a lie. It's
Well, the thing is, I'm
yeah,
not going to be a felon. That's the thing. I
there
will
you
not
go.
commit felonies. That's the end of the
Hmm.
story. So, when you say you can't go back, well, I'm
Mm,
not going to become a felon. So
okay.
the door closes, and the door has a little name tag on it. It says felon.
Mm, hmm.
So the way I look at it is there's no such thing as that. It's just I'm not going to commit. I'm not. I've never ever had any legal trouble. I've had like a few speeding tickets maybe in my whole life, literally.
Okay.
So, and I paid all my taxes. I had my driver's license. I had everything all perfect.
Yeah.
I was the first one in getting my driver's license renewed 2 or 3 months early or a month early, getting my plates renewed a month early. Everything had to be perfect. All the paperwork had to be perfect. Like I was that guy my whole life.
Yeah.
So, people think that what I'm doing is illegal, but in fact, what I'm doing is actually cleaning up that of which I'm doing, which is illegal.
Mm-hmm.
That's really what it is. I wasn't committing felonies because I wasn't willful, but once it became known these various terms and definitions and what they were, at that point I did become a felon for a short time. I was very, very nervous about it, and I ran around and to the Social Security Administration and the DMV and the passport and all these different places, and I was made a list of every single place I had ever said I was a U.S. citizen, and I ran around like a madman to fix all of it as fast as I possibly could, like my hair was on fire.
Mm-hmm.
So I was a felon for a very, very short period of time. Um, but I wasn't really because it's one of those things where it was like I said something prior to knowing,
Mm-hmm.
and then once I knew, I immediately went out and cleaned it up as rapidly as humanly possible. So I wasn't really a felon, but like if I would have continued or not handled it or continued to say that I was this thing that I'm not, that would have been felonies for sure.
Wow. Okay.
So if we continue on this case here,
Yeah.
um, the first observation we have to make on this clause is that it puts at rest both the questions which we stated to have been the subject of differences of opinion. It declares that persons may be citizens of the United States without regard to their citizenship of a particular state. So this right here, it declares that a person may be, because remember earlier he said that eminent judges said that you can't be a United States citizen and there was only state citizenship. Now here, Samuel Freeman Miller and his boys, they're saying that you can be a citizen of the United States without any regard of of the citizenship of a particular state. And that's again why you see this terminology: a U.S. citizen and resident of California. You're a citizen of the District of Columbia, and you're temporarily in a foreign country called California. Needless to say, I canceled my voter registration because I'm not a felon.
Right.
There's a way you can still vote. I'm not going to get into all that. It's like a whole nother hour, hour and a half, but it goes into a whole bunch of other. There's still, in my course, in my free course for people who are really crazy about voting, I teach you a way you can still vote. It's not really all that complicated, that you can do it in a way that's legal, that won't make you a felon. But I just don't do it because I don't do anything at all that's even like close to anything that could be considered like a felony. So
Okay.
I just don't do it because I don't even want to go within like a football field of it. But if you still want to vote, I teach you in the course, there is a way you can do it, and it is legal. It's just no one else. It's just so far beyond anything anyone's ever seen that getting other people to try to understand what you're doing can be complicated, but it is legal,
Yeah.
100% legal.
Wow.
So, and it overturns the Dred Scott decision by making all persons born within the United States and subject to its jurisdiction citizens of the United States. So in the Dred Scott, they said that you can't be U.S. citizen. Doesn't exist. It's just a term. It doesn't really even exist as like its own special term. They're saying here this overturns that, and now the United States has its own separate class of citizenship called the U.S. citizen category, which is totally different than state citizenship. We've already covered that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, if this type of citizenship was born in 1873 and the original Constitution was running from whenever it was written, 1776 or whatever, all the way up until this point for state citizens,
Mm-hmm.
which category of citizenship do you think the Constitution still applies to?
Oh gosh. What?
The state citizenship.
Ugh.
Constitution has absolutely nothing to do with being a U.S. citizen. Saying Constitution and U.S. citizen in the same sentence is like saying Constitution and French citizen. This is why you have to get a business license. This is why you
Yeah.
have to get a driver's license. I can't get a driver's license. If I get a driver's license, bing, 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 where do I go? Straight to prison.
Mm-hmm.
If I pay taxes, I go to prison. If I register to vote, I go to prison. Now, there's benefits to that too, though.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I don't have a driver's license. I have nothing like that at all whatsoever. So like things like speed limits, all this kind of stuff, it's all optional. Has nothing to do with a state citizen.
Mm-hmm.
Now that gets into titling and stuff. For example, when you go to the DMV, you're actually giving the DMV title of your vehicle. That's a whole nother rabbit hole. So you have to actually make sure that you address that first, because the whole reason why the police even have jurisdiction over your car at all is because of the way that your car is titled, the DMV. But as long as you correct that, and as long as you have no driver's license, that's it. Those are the 2 points of connectivity between the police and people who are driving or operate whatever.
Mm-hmm.
using a car, right? So the driver's license connects you as an individual to the state and to the police. And then the way that the car is titled with the DMV connects the car. So for example, if you don't have a driver's license, we see this all the time. If you don't have a driver's license, but you still have your car registered with the DMV, they can take the car, but they can't do anything with you. So they just leave you on the side of the road.
Oh.
So it's a two-pronged, you have to really understand you got to think, like America was built on the protections of private property,
Mm-hmm.
and the roads are public roads. So how is it that the police can pull you over and tell you what to do on public roads with private property? And the answer to the question is that no one talks about, including people on my side of the fence and the police and the government and everybody, is it comes down to title and ownership. The title with the DMV is a certificate of title, which means copy or evidence that there's a title someplace else. You start going down that rabbit hole, and there's the original actual title is called a manufacturer certificate or statement of origin. That's the actual title. So you don't have the actual title. Who does? The state does. And that's why they're able to pull you over and tell you what to do with your car. That's the actual legal answer. And all these people online, they're all arguing and fighting on both sides of the equation. And they're saying right to travel, and they're saying this, and they're listing, case law on right to travel, which I have that too. Right to travel. All this stuff. It's all irrelevant, really. It's all irrelevant. I mean, it
Yeah.
is important. Like these cases are really important, and they do tell you that you have a right to travel and all this. Yes, it's true. You do.
Hmm.
The problem is that if you have a driver's license, or if you have your car titled with the DMV and you have a certificate of title, you don't own the car. That's the problem.
Yeah.
So if I got pulled over, I own my car and I have no driver's license.
Hmm.
Now what are they going to do?
Mm.
And you say to yourself, well, Brandon, they're still going to do whatever they're going to do and break your window and do all these different things. Yeah, fine. But then at that point, now I can sue them, and I have a real cause of action because I can prove that I actually own the car.
Wow.
No, everyone on the streets, when you see them driving around, literally
Yeah.
every single person on the streets, nobody owns a car.
Yeah.
There, I would bet in 50 years of operating an automobile or cruising around in your car or your motorcycle, you've probably never even seen visually a car that a person actually owned. If you did, it's like very, very, very few people own their cars. Same thing with houses.
Yep.
A lot of this stuff recently, and it's been kind of popping up, and people are talking about it, and Ron DeSantis is talking about it. Why is it that when a house is fully paid off, you're still paying property taxes?
Yep.
It's the same answer. You don't own your house, no one does. No one owns their house, no one owns their cars. Actually, no one owns their businesses, and no one owns their own bank account. We can go down that rabbit hole too. That's a whole nother rabbit hole.
So you own
Businesses,
nothing
you don't. So this whole you'll own nothing and be
and
happy
be
thing.
happy.
No one's owned anything for a long
Okay.
time. All the bank accounts are all corporate accounts. All corporations are all underneath this corporation thing that's in the District of Columbia called the United States. Every single company that was opened in the United States is basically just a sub corporation of the United States. It's basically like everything is essentially government. All businesses are just an extension of the government, and all cars and all bank accounts and all everything is all just extensions of the government.
Okay, let's take a pause here. All right, audience, take a moment, take a couple of deep breaths. You will own nothing, you don't own anything, and you'll be happy. Well, I guess you're happy because you don't know that you don't own everything.
Well, no, because they do all these
Ah.
things. They do the benefits. They do the Ubers and the apps. They make life easy, right? So
Hmm.
life has
Yep.
gotten easier
Hmm.
throughout these past. But the thing is that you just don't own anything. Now there's pros and cons to not owning anything. The pro to not owning anything is that
Interesting.
if it ain't your house, why are you fixing it? Why are you paying for it? If a pipe breaks and it ain't your house, why are you paying for it? So I actually don't even say everyone should go out and start to own everything. You can if you want, but you have a second option.
Okay, let's hear
Con-
it.
Continue to let the government own everything and then just send them all the bills.
Right.
So that's
Wow.
also
Fun.
like if we go to certificate of title, we'll just go off on a little tangent here, but if we go to certificate of title, right, and we pull up one of these certificates of title, certificate means copy of something or abstract of something or evidence that something exists someplace else. So if you have a certificate of title, that means you do not have the title.
Okay.
So people think, oh, I got the pink slip. Okay. So who has the
No.
title? I do. I have the pink slip. No.
Okay.
You have an abstract showing the title is someplace else. Who has the title is listed at the top of the pink slip. This is who has the title.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. They list you as the registered owner. What does that mean?
Mm.
People think registered owner. Oh, I know what that means. Yeah, well, keep assuming definitions, and they're just gonna get worse and worse for you. Registered owner. Owner whose name is recorded in a security issuer's registrars as a securities owner and is entitled to receive dividend or interest and principal payouts. So in English, I'm not going to go through all these words. It's going to take an hour. In English, what does this mean? It means that the registered owner is the person who's entitled to the profits of a commercial activity. So when you look at the certificate of title, registered owner, what all this means is state of California owns the car. This is a certificate of the title, meaning an abstract copy. You're the registered owner, which means that you can use your motor vehicle in commercially, such as transporting persons or property for some sort of fee, rate, charge, or other consideration.
Mm-hmm.
And then the profits associated with that activity are yours. That's what registered owner means.
Okay.
Now you got to think, if you just left it like this, that's fine. When your car needs new tires, who should be paying for it? Who owns the car?
California.
That's correct.
Okay,
State of
so
California, not
state of
California.
state of California.
Two
So
totally different things.
how would you get them to pay for it?
Well, that's a whole nother. that's a
That's a whole
that's a
yeah.
whole nother. That's a whole other. That's litigation and all sorts of fun
Okay.
stuff, right?
All right. And this clarifies why you have 26 videos. There is so much information.
Yeah. So everything is structured like this.
Mhm.
You hold some kind of interest. People don't realize the word owner means you hold some sort of interest in something.
Mhm.
Absolute owner would be the term that you would see if you are the actual owner in terms of what people think the definition of the word owner means.
Right.
So if it said absolute owner and then it said title up top, okay, now we have a whole different conversation.
Jeez.
We don't have that. We have a certificate of title and we have registered owners. So title and owner is a term, and now we have qualifying terms: certificate of title and registered owner. There's a whole bunch of different types of ownership. Ownership is a whole rabbit hole in itself. People think ownership, they see that word owner and it just means like one thing. No, it means a whole bunch of different things. You can look it up in Black's Law, look up all the different types of ownership. Ownership means expressing an interest in something. And then there's all sorts of different ways that interest can be cut up or qualified.
You are very smart.
Thank you.
Well, to keep all of this in your head and to have the fortitude to go through and look up all these words. And I know it's part of your religion as well, but man, and to remember it all. And I'm just watching this, and I've seen you do some of it, and I'm all every time I'm just like, oh my gracious. Hey, Brandon, can we go quickly just to what is money?
No, because it just takes too long.
Okay.
It just takes way too long.
Can you just give a general statement of what it is?
I'd rather continue with the slaughterhouse
Okay.
cases. I think it's going to be better for your audience to try
Okay.
to, because that's just too much.
Okay. You got it.
Okay. So um so we've already covered that, right? Then let's see here. The next observation is more important in view of the arguments of counsel in the present case. It is that the distinction between citizenship of the United States and citizenship of a state is clearly recognized and established. Not only may a man be a citizen of the United States without being a citizen of a state, but an important element is necessary to convert the former into the latter. He must reside within the state to make him a citizen of it, but it is only necessary that he should be born or naturalized in the United States to be a citizen of the Union. Pretty confusing. This one's pretty confusing, actually. Right?
Yes.
So he's saying here that there's a distinction between being a citizen of the United States and being a citizen of a state, right? Which we've already covered. That's pretty simple, right? Not only may a man be a citizen of the United States without being a citizen of a state, but an important element is necessary to convert the former into the latter. So to convert a citizen of the United States into a citizen of a state, he must reside within the state to make him a citizen of it, but it is only necessary that he should be born or naturalized in the United States to be a citizen of the Union. That last part I don't really totally understand. I guess he's switching this definition here over to the other type of definition that we think of when we hear the term, because being born or naturalized in the United States, yeah, I don't know. This last part's pretty confusing. I don't know about that, right?
Okay.
But we'll just go to the next part. It is quite clear then there is a citizenship of the United States and a citizenship of a state, which are distinct from each other and which depend upon different characteristics or circumstances in the individual. Now, keep in mind, citizenship of the United States, we've already covered that. The only thing that they're allowed to do is be here. They can't be deported. Citizenship of a state, that's where we have the Bill of Rights, the Constitution, all the good stuff. So citizenship of the United States, they have to have a concealed carry permit to bear arms. They have to have a business license. They have to have a driver's license. They have to have every other type of license to take a piss, right? And then citizenship of the state is where all your rights are at. But the problem is that no one's saying that they have the citizenship of a state. Everyone's telling the government they have citizenship of the United States and that they are a resident in a state, which means foreigner. So your citizenship is not in both the United States and a state. Your citizenship is only in the United States and you're not even there. It's like me saying I'm a citizen of France while I'm living in Norway. That's literally every single person in all of America, all the 50 states, the District of Columbia, and the 5 inhabited territories. I'm sorry, actually, they're actually correct. The people who are in the District of Columbia or the 5 inhabited territories, if they say they're a U.S. citizen, that's actually okay. It's all the people in the 50 states of the Union. When they say that they're a U.S. citizen, they're saying that their citizenship lies with the District of Columbia and that they're actually a foreigner inside of their state. And you wonder where your rights went. This is where your rights went. All your rights are here. But you're here. And how did you get there? You told them. Actually, in fact, you tell them all the time. We think this distinction and its explicit recognition in the amendment of great weight in this argument, because the next paragraph of this same section, which is one mainly relied on by the plaintiffs in error, speaks only of privileges and immunities of citizens of the United States and does not speak of those of citizens of the several states. So what are they saying here? So the privileges and immunities clause in the 14th Amendment only applies to citizens. But citizens of the several states have rights. So the released Negro slaves have privileges and immunities. The white people, sorry, that's the way it is. The white people in the states have rights. So if you say you're a U.S. citizen, and then in the same sentence you say you have rights, this is why the courts laugh at you. A U.S. citizen does not have any rights. In fact, I'm sorry, that's incorrect. United States citizens have one right. The only absolute and unqualified right of U.S. citizenship, I added the U.S. in there, is to residence within the territorial boundaries of the United States. A citizen cannot be either deported or denied reentry. That is the only right. So when you say I have rights, that's false because the word rights is plural. You have one right as a U.S. citizen, only one. You don't have rights, you have a right. Everything else is privileges and immunities.
Mm-hmm.
Privileges can be taken away, rights cannot be taken away. And again, the problem with all this is just you're telling them all the time that you're a U.S. citizen.
Oh.
All the time. Every time you send a W-9, you're committing well, you're not, if you didn't know, it's not willful, but
Mm-hmm.
it's real close. It's real close to a felony, man. I mean, it's like the thickness of a human hair away from a felony every single time you sign a W-9 form. I mean, it's so close. It's unbelievable.
Mm. This makes my heart hurt.
Yeah. So you can't be a U.S. citizen if you say you are. I mean, I don't think anyone will ever get prosecuted for it, but
Yeah.
I don't, there's just because uh, just because I don't think I'll get caught, I'm not going to go stab somebody. Just because I'm not going to get caught, I'm not going to steal. You know what I mean? I don't want to live a life where I am, worried about being prosecuted for some sort of illegal act or felony. So, um, I ran around and cleaned up all these things. And if anybody calls me a resident of anything, I freak out because I'm absolutely not. That'd also be perjury. And if anybody calls me a U.S. citizen, I freak out. It's real simple. So I am not either of those things. I'm not a resident of any place, and I'm not a U.S. citizen, and I never have been. So um, it's very, very simple. Very, very, very simple, right? But if we go into some more of these quotes, this case is just chock full of these quotes, right? Um, let's see here. We think this distinction and its explicit recognition in this amendment. Oh yeah, of the privileges and immunities of the citizen of the United States and of the privileges and immunities of the citizen of the state and what they respectfully are, we will presently consider. But we wish to state here that it is only the former which are placed by this clause under the protection of the federal Constitution, and that the latter, whatever they may be, are not intended to have any additional protection by this paragraph by the amendment. This is a good one.
Mhm.
So what he's saying here is the 14th Amendment and the privileges and immunities of it only have to do with the citizens of the United States. It has nothing to do with citizens of a state. Um, the latter are not intended to have any additional protection by this paragraph of the amendment. But we don't need that protection. There's nothing, it's like having a sandwich shop that serves the greatest sandwiches in the world all day long, every day. It's just filled with sandwiches from all over the world, the best Italian bread in the world, the greatest hams, the greatest turkey. And someone comes in with this like dilapidated, like really nasty, gross, rotting sandwich,
Mhm.
and they say, you can't have this.
Mm.
That's basically what they're saying here. There's nothing in the 14th Amendment that comes even close to the powers that are located in being a citizen of the state. All the right to bear arms, all the freedoms that everyone has thought is gone and thought they lost is all in being a citizen of the state. It's all still there. All you got to do is just start telling them that you're a citizen of a state and stop telling them you're a citizen of the United States. It's the easiest thing in the world. And then bang, you get all your rights back.
Ooh. Okay, not only is my heart hurting, but my head's hurting.
Yeah. It's the simplest thing in the world. That's where all your rights went.
Okay,
The slaughterhouse cases is very clear about all of this, right? Um,
man.
If then there is a difference between the privileges and immunities belonging to a citizen of the United States as such, and those belonging to the citizen of the state as such, the latter must rest for their security and protection, where they have heretofore rested, for they are not embraced by this paragraph of the amendment. So basically, the 14th doesn't apply to a state citizen, but we don't need it. There's nothing in the 14th Amendment that I would want or need anyways.
Hmm.
So why would I be concerned about the fact that the 14th Amendment has nothing to do with my classification, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, Here he's talking about a case in 1823. This is in the slaughterhouse cases. Samuel Freeman Miller is talking about another case. Okay. And the quote from Mr. Justice Washington in the Circuit Court for the District of Pennsylvania in 1823 says here, the inquiry, he says, is what are the privileges and immunities of citizens of the several states? We feel no hesitation in confining these expressions to those privileges and immunities which are fundamental, which belong of right to the citizen of all free governments, and which have at times been enjoyed by citizens of the several states which compose this union from the time of their becoming free, independent, and sovereign. What these fundamental principles are, it would be more tedious than difficult to enumerate. They may all, however, be comprehended under the following general heads: protection by the government, with the right to acquire and possess property of every kind, and to pursue and obtain happiness and safety, subject, nevertheless, to such restraints as the government may prescribe for the general good of the whole.
Mm-hmm.
This is what people think America is. It's still here. It's just everyone has basically naturalized themselves into the District of Columbia by telling everyone all the time that they're a U.S. citizen.
Wow. Okay. Thank you so much for spending your time here with me, with us. I want to ask you some personal questions. Do you feel
Sure,
like we can
sure, sure.
move to
Yeah,
that for a
yeah,
second?
yeah.
Okay, let me just
There's
sit.
more, obviously. There's several
Oh
more
my
more.
gosh.
So the slaughterhouse case is just filled with all of this information because that case is when all this happened. So it's been this way since 1873.
Okay, let me ask you, Brandon, what are your friends like?
My closest friend is a stand-up comedian.
Really? That makes a whole heck of a lot of sense. Are they
He's actually open for Russell Peters.
okay? All right, what's his name? Do you mind sharing?
Vinayak Pal.
Okay. Is he, I'm assuming, into all of this as well?
He's actually not.
No way.
Yeah. And in fact, I think it's kind of healthy. He's like my outlet. He's like my,
Oh,
we go out to a lot of comedy shows together. So I kind of support him with his career and stuff and kind of go out. I think
okay. Good
it's a
balance.
good, yeah, it's like I need a little bit of, I think a little bit of walking away from this. Because if I didn't
Okay.
have some of that, I think I just always, it's okay. It's like, I'm like 97% here, but then like the 3%, it's good for me to be someplace else and kind of get away from it for a minute.
Mm. Okay, and tell me about okay, so Scientology has a good bit of controversy itself. How did you get involved with Scientology? Yeah, how did that happen for you?
My mom got really, really sick,
Okay.
in a really weird way back when I was probably 19 years old. And
Okay.
she started gaining a lot of weight and she started acting like she was like possessed. It was really weird. And she was really scared that she was going to die. And she was in really bad emotional and spiritual and physical shape.
Mhm.
And so she went to the library, local library in the middle of nowhere, Hebron, Indiana, middle of
Mhm.
nowhere. It's close to Maryville, Valparaiso, Gary, Hammond. Um, and she got all these books and she was reading everything, Eckhart Tolle, Tony Robbins, anything from nutrition, um, you know, mentality,
Mhm.
spirituality, And she was just trying to figure out what went wrong because we'd already taken her to a bunch of hospitals. She'd already had like a thyroid surgery and stuff, and it was just a nightmare. Just
Okay.
made things worse. And she found the book Dianetics, and she read that book, and then that's kind of what started everything. She called a family meeting, and she said, I found this book, and it's pretty amazing. And I found out that it's this religion now because we had never heard of any of this, being in the middle of nowhere in Indiana. I'd never heard the name L. Ron Hubbard. I had never heard the term Scientology. I had never heard the term Dianetics in my whole life, right?
Okay. So were y'all a certain faith before this or?
Yeah, well, I grew up as a Lutheran, but we
Okay.
stopped going to church probably when I was about, I don't know, 12 or 13 or something.
Mhm.
Um, so, I was kicked out of Sunday school too for asking too many questions. Surprise, surprise, right? I wasn't even being mean about it. I just had a lot of questions and it was just not going to work. So
Yeah.
they booted me for that. But
Oh,
I never
shucks.
I never felt bad about it. I never had any hard feelings. I was just like, all right, well, probably best for the both of us. But but the um I when mom told me that, I was like, wait, we're gonna go see some goofy religion up in what, Chicago? And yeah, it was in Chicago, right? So um I wanted to go just because it was in Chicago, honestly. I just wanted to go to Chicago.
Okay.
I wanted to go to like Millennium Park or something. I don't know. I lived, that area where I grew up, Chesterton, Indiana, and Hebron, Indiana, is that my two homes. Chesterton, I was there until I was about 10, and then Hebron from 10 until 19, right? And uh, the South Shore train runs straight from Chesterton, Indiana, straight into the city in like no time flat, like an hour. And it's like, at that time it was probably like $6 for a ticket or something like that, or less, who knows? But I just never went for whatever reason. You know, we would talk about it and we just never went. I think we went to Chicago a couple times for like a hot minute here and there, but I mean, having no money doesn't help, right?
Right.
And just hearing that this church was in Chicago was enough for me. I was excited. So
Okay. So how many were in your family?
myself, my little brother, my stepdad, and then my mom.
Okay. So y'all all headed. And where's the home base? Is that Chicago?
No, the big center is in Clearwater, Florida.
Florida. Okay. Thank you. Okay. So go ahead.
So we go to Chicago and we do the thing and we get started. And I thought it was kind of weird or whatever, but then I was like, all right, whatever. My whole family's there and like they're my ride, so it's not like I can do anything anyways, right? But I thought it was cool. I was like, whatever. I'll check it out. And I did a few of the basic courses. I did the basic study manual, which is a course on how to study and clear up words and stuff. It's one of the first things I ever did. And I did a communications class called Success Through Communications. And it was actually when I was on the basic study manual course is actually when I realized that this is what I want to do, and this is like super amazing. Because I had always had a hard time studying. I could never read really, and it wasn't like I was illiterate necessarily.
Yeah.
It was just that I would just fall asleep whenever I was reading, almost like a narcolepsy kind of a thing when I'm reading. So, but then come to find out, according to the religious text, that's because you go past words you don't understand. So the first 3 years in the religion, I was very, very much in dictionaries all the time because I just didn't understand the definitions of like any words, right? And it's kind of funny, 15 years later, after doing all that for that long, to come and find out that now there's this whole other layer to the onion, thinking that I thought the definition of the word citizenship and I thought I
Yeah.
understood nationality, I thought I understood the word residence, and then now find out even that was all wrong and all false. And the dictionaries don't tell you the correct definitions when they're used in contractual or legal or government related interactions, right? So, yeah, I mean, my whole life essentially has been pretty well since the point I was 19 years old. I mean, misunderstood words and looking up misunderstood words and the pursuit of understanding of symbology and words has been a major, major part of my life. And it's the main thing that got me to really devote myself to the religion. And then I wound up working at the church for about 8 years. I worked in Chicago, LA, and New York City. And then I did professional, what's called auditor training, which is the type of therapy that we offer in the church. I did tons of that all the way up to the very top of where you can get at this point in time. And then in 2007 and 2010, the entire historical chronological past that had never been available up until that point had been released, which was like 1,600 hours of lectures. And I worked on that. It's called the chronological route. It's all the research from 1948 until 1961. So it's not even his whole research track. It's just a big. It's like probably 65% or maybe even 70% of all the research he ever did that was published.
Mhm.
And it took me 7 years to finish that. I worked on it every single day for 7 years.
Gracious.
And I finished that, I think, in 2017 or 2018.
Hmm.
And there's only probably like 50 people on the whole planet that have ever done that. So, not many people have done that whole chronological route. It's just not something that people typically do. So yeah, I would probably say, with all of my therapy training, as well as having finished the entire chronological line of research, as well as working for the church for 8 years, I'm probably one of the highest trained Scientologists in the world, actually. But a lot of it just comes down to uh, understanding the definitions of words, cleaning up the definitions of
Yeah.
words. It really does. It really does. I mean, it really is kind of like even Mr. Hubbard talks about it. It's kind of like the spinal cord of our whole religion. Really, it is. I'm not kidding. I mean, it's
Hmm.
if you boiled the whole religion down to, what is the tenet number one? What is the most important thing? What is the most um, spinal cord, nervous system, skeletal system aspect of the whole religion? It's this whole clearing up words and looking at the definitions of words and the etymology of words, and understanding grammar and symbology, really.
Okay, that's so interesting. I didn't know that. All right, because there are so many falsities out there, and when I talk about the controversy of Scientology, with you being in it, is that true from your perspective?
Well, we do have these upper levels that are confidential, but the way that Mr. Hubbard talks about it is
Yeah.
it's just dangerous to just start giving that information out to random people. You have to kind of like be ready for it, essentially.
Mhm.
And we have this thing called the bridge, which is where you go step by step by step by step. And then when you're actually ready to get on those upper levels, then there's a confidential course room and stuff like that, which I haven't done any of that, so I wouldn't really even know what's there. But the confidential stuff is confidential for a reason, because it can be a lot of that information, according to Mr. Hubbard, which I haven't seen the information, so I wouldn't know, can be used to really harm society in a really awful way if it was got into the wrong hands or something like that. So, um, and then also just a person themselves has to be ready. I mean, the whole point of the entire bridge that we have step by step is you start off with like easier things like memory drills and stuff like that, and then you move up to more difficult things like transgressions that you've done and things that you feel
Mhm.
guilty about is obviously difficult. And then above that, we start getting into trauma, physical car accidents and trauma. So there's this whole sort of step by step thing called the bridge that basically allows a person to kind of start at the easier stuff and then move up. And then obviously for people who are in really good mental and spiritual shape, they just kind of like speed through those levels in like 10 seconds.
Okay, so
But
it's really getting into the emotional, spiritual, like you really looking, like I would say, like doing shadow work, really getting into who you are, what makes you tick.
yeah, and what's interesting is that at the lower levels, all the way up
Ah,
until you start getting to the confidential stuff, a lot of the confidential stuff, which again, I've never done it, so I wouldn't know,
yeah.
but a lot of the upper levels that people talk about and the confidential stuff and all that, a lot of that is done you by yourself. It's called solo auditing. You're actually
Hmm.
auditing by yourself, right?
Hmm.
All the lower stuff, all the way up to what's called clear, and like all the lower stuff and all the stuff that you really see anybody doing is all done with another person.
Mhm.
So that's another thing too, is that you have to have enough mental and emotional fortitude to be able to kind of fly on your own. You even get a little
Mhm.
pin when you finish the solo auditor course, and it has little wings on it. It's a solo auditor and it has little wings because you're learning to fly solo by yourself, meaning you're learning to audit or provide therapy on yourself by yourself.
Mhm.
Um, it's a long road typically to get there.
Yeah. Okay, last question on that. If someone came up to you and said Scientology is a cult, because there's a lot of not so good stuff out there, what would you say?
Well, the definition of the word
Oh, good
cult
one. Let's go.
is a group of individuals that basically kind of look up to a figurehead.
Yeah.
It's a one person centric group. If we were to make it simple and say what's the
Hmm.
definition of the word cult and keep it really simple, it's a group of people that are centric upon one person's
One figure.
ideas,
Mhm.
whims, teachings, something, right?
Mhm.
Under that definition, absolutely, it absolutely would be. But the thing is that nobody knows that's the definition. Everybody just runs around and says that word, and they don't know what it means.
Yeah.
So the reason why it's a difficult question to even talk about is because you never know what's in someone's head because everyone has a different definition because no one knows the actual definition.
Hmm.
And that's why everyone gets so emotional on the subject. I mean, I call even my platform a cult. All these, we got like 100,000 people running around and filing documents and giving up their driver's licenses and getting weird passports and suing government agencies and doing all this crazy stuff.
I want to be one of those. Okay.
Yeah, we,
Yeah.
we call ourselves Pickletarians. I say straight up, this is totally a cult. 100%. Because it's a group of individuals that are working or operating or based off of a figurehead. I am the figurehead. I mean, Joey Kimbrough is there too, but he's really not a figurehead here. I
Yeah.
mean, he is a litigation and procedural engineer, and without him, none of this would be possible. But he's not. He's sort of a figurehead, but not. I mean, he kind of is, but he kind of he. I think he prefers to just do his work, and he's just kind of more into the minutia of it all. I'm on the front end of this thing. And like I had this whole platform before he came along. So,
Mhm.
you know what I mean? Like to say that there's figureheads, maybe, kind of. I've sort of made Joey kind of a figurehead, like in our private group and stuff. Like he chimes in. I've made him like I put like special tags on him. It says like group expert and stuff like that. But I think even within his own mind or even within his own words, he wouldn't consider himself like a figurehead necessarily. We have a lot of plans in the future. And I think there's certain things that he's told me privately that he wants to do. And I think that he would be the figurehead in those areas for sure. Really deep kind of litigation based engineering type plans and projects that I don't know what he wants me to say and not say, so I won't. But um, yeah, it is a cult because you have a figurehead. You have a figurehead, and then you have everything kind of based off of that figurehead. So, people say, oh, it's a cult and this is a cult and that's a cult. And it's like they're just kind of showing their own ignorance because they don't know the definition of the word. Most things are cults. I mean, look at the word culture. Most things are cults. I mean,
I think you can throw down your microphone on that one. I'm done here.
yeah. I mean, most things are. I mean, families are cults. If the father holds a strong household and he runs the show and what he says goes, that family is a cult.
Okay, you're giving us some more things to think about.
So yes, definitely I have a cult and I'm involved in cults and I have multiple cults and apparently I'm pretty into it. So I might as well just lean into it. Yeah.
You might as well just go for it.
Might as well go for it. Yeah.
Go
So
for it. Wow. All right. This was a
it
riveting
comes down
conversation.
to it comes down to the intent of the figurehead. You have these
That's
guys
true
like
too.
Jim Jones who went
Right.
and had everybody drink the whatever, and then you have guys like what's his face, the Waco incident, right?
Mhm.
So it comes down to intent, and intent can get kind of weird. Like that guy in Waco, when you start reading about him in great depth, I forget his name. Gosh, what's his name?
I know.
Waco. It's on the tip of my tongue.
I know, me
Waco
too.
guy. I just typed Waco guy.
I'm sure it
David
came up.
Koresh.
Okay, thank you.
David Koresh. So you start going down the rabbit hole of David Koresh. It's kind of interesting because like you start to study him in great detail, and you're like, does this guy like what is this guy's intentions? Is he like a bad guy? Is he like a good guy? Is he just crazy? And like he's one of those guys that you just can't even tell. Like you don't know, like even after studying him and going down the rabbit hole and looking at everything, it's kind of like because they have documentaries on Netflix and stuff about him, and they have people who are actually there.
Mhm.
And they talk about what they were experiencing when they were actually there and how it was actually a wonderful thing. And we had this like big family together, and it was actually really wonderful in a lot of ways. But then David Koresh started to basically, this is also creepy and spiritual. He started to prophesize that there would be this war with the federal government. And they were like preparing for this war with the federal government. And then it happened, and it's like so crazy because it's almost like did David Koresh and his people like will that whole situation into existence? It's really a fascinating conversation that I've never heard anybody really talk about because when you study Waco in great detail and then you see what happened, it's kind of like you said this was going to happen. You were preparing for it forever. You were talking about it every single day. That's why they put up such a great fight, though. That's why it went on and on and on for so long because that was like they knew it was coming and they were prepared for it. They were talking about it every single day. So when it came, it wasn't like you hear like David Koresh on the phone on the phone calls he had with the FBI or whoever it was, and he's very calm. There's one where he got shot. He's like very calm, is because like to them like this was going to happen. So it's like it's so weird. It's sort of like did these people will this
Yeah.
whole situation into existence?
Hmm.
You know, the Jim Jones thing is, I think, more cut and dry because I think he was like he had like a slave farm and like all this kind of craziness. So that one, but it just comes down to intent. Everything comes down to intent. I mean, hey, corporations are cults. If the CEO,
Yeah,
like
that's right. Yeah.
Amazon is
Yeah.
totally a cult, 100%. Tesla is totally a cult. So the more you have a figurehead, like when you hear the name of a company and you think of a person or you see a picture of a face, that's a cult.
That's a cult.
So like if I say Starbucks, do you get a name or a picture?
No. I
Okay,
their logo, but that's about it.
so I wouldn't classify Starbucks as a cult.
Hmm.
People say it has a cult following
Right.
because it does. It has a cult like following,
Yes.
but there is no figurehead.
Hmm.
So by definition, Starbucks would not be a cult.
Okay, Brandon. So what is your intent then?
My intent is the 14th Amendment was never legally ratified. And I have in 1967 there's a whole section where Congress talks about this in great detail as to how that went down and what happened, and it has all the various evidence and all this kind of stuff, right? So even though I've taught you about all this U.S. citizen stuff and all this citizen, the 14th Amendment was never even legally ratified to begin with. So my ultimate goal is to have the 14th Amendment recognized as having never been legally ratified and having been fraudulent since its supposed inception. Now, what will that do? The District of Columbia, Federal Reserve notes, goofy banking, police, pulling people over for traffic tickets, non crimes that have no victim, the CDC, the FBI, every single three-letter agency, every single aspect of government would all instantaneously evaporate because they're all based off of that U.S. citizen category.
Yeah.
So if you take out the U.S. citizen category, you basically wipe out almost everything that you see in society that you have ever complained about in your entire life. All of it sits. It's like a giant cone, and the very, very tip of the cone is this like very, very, very unstable thing called the 14th Amendment that isn't even really there. And you pull that, it's just a little like carpet. You pull that, and the whole thing comes down, every single inch of it. So what would happen if the 14th Amendment was recognized as having never been legally ratified in the first place? What are you going to be left with? Local. So the local courthouse would be like by city. So like my little city would have their own little courthouse, and then like the people right around the courthouse would be like the people who go there, right? The county recorder. So how that works is that if you get a car, and you would like to record the fact that you got the car, you would take the bill of sale that you have, just the handwritten bill of sale that you got from the guy that you bought it from. You would take it down to the county recorder, and you would spend like, well, if we didn't have the 14th Amendment, we would have gold and silver coins back. So it'd be like little tiny bits of silver coin or whatever. You would pay that, and then you would because the whole monetary system is based off of the 14th Amendment too. So all of that would go as well. So basically, think like 1840, and that's
Okay.
basically the America we would have if the 14th Amendment was removed. So think of like a Wild West movie, like Tombstone,
Yeah.
but just add in lots more people, new fashion cyborgs, because we've got cyborgs now. So just imagine like the political atmosphere and the legal atmosphere of like a Tombstone movie,
Yeah.
just with all the technology and cars, and there'd be no cops on the streets. There'd be no traffic cops. There'd be no traffic cameras. Um, there'd be peace officers, but they'd be roaming around just like, they'd be roaming around specifically just to like help people get off the side of the road because they broke
Okay. Keeping the
down,
peace. Yeah.
or like someone broke their, a tire, and it's like a woman, like, a strong man pulls over in his cop car, and he like puts out a couple cones, and he helps the woman with her tire because it's heavy and she doesn't know what she's doing and she doesn't know what's going on. Most men don't these days. So it's just kind of one of those things where that would be the world we live in. And then the way that all ownership would be confined is through the county recorder. And it'd be very simple. Like when you get a certificate of title and you're a registered owner at the DMV, there's all this different cut-ups of who has ownership, and you're just given a security interest, and it's used as a commercial vehicle, and it's all this confusion, right? So if we go back to 1840, you would just get like, you just drop a little bill of sale with a guy, you bought a used car, and then you go down to the county recorder and you'd say, hey, I just bought this used car, I want to record this bill of sale. And then if anybody is wondering, like, let's say the car is sitting out here for 2 weeks and it's like abandoned, and like someone's wondering what happened to it, they could look up the car in the county recorder, and then they would see that, Dave Davidson is the new owner, as of the bill of sale that was last recorded. And then they can contact David Davidson or whatever and say, hey, this car's been here for 2 weeks, blah, 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 blah. But like, the reason why the car can get towed is because the state owns it. The reason why the cops can give you tickets is because the state
Right.
owns it. That's why. Now you ask me, Brandon, what's stopping anyone from taking a bill of sale right now and going down to the county recorder? The answer is no, nothing. If you never go to the DMV, then the state doesn't own the vehicle. So if you buy a vehicle, you get a bill of sale, and you go down to the county recorder and record it, you're done.
Well, I like your intention. I like what you're doing. I think it, again, to empower people, to let them know. What do you think that's going to happen?
Oh,
That,
definitely.
well, there you go. I don't think there's anything else to say here. That was beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing about Scientology. You gave me a different perspective as well. So I really appreciate that. Hey, and again, thank you for all of your hard work. And I know you're doing a lot of podcasts right now. So thank you for expending your time here. And that's it. Anything else you want to say?
No, thank you very much for having me on the show.
You're welcome. All right, everybody, stay tuned for next week. Thank you, Brandon. Over and out. See you later. Y'all find me on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, True Social, as well as Rumble, BitChute, YouTube, plus a plethora of other audio directories like Apple Podcasts and Spotify. So like, subscribe, do it all. See ya.